My name is Mary Bennett. I'm 35 years old, and for most of my adult life, I've served as a senior intelligence officer stationed out of Fort Bragg, North Carolina. That title means nothing to my family, though. To them, I've always been just the one who works behind a desk, the quiet disappointment in a house built on medals, discipline, and battlefield glory. My father, Harold Bennett, retired as a colonel after 32 years of military service. His uniform, complete with a wall of commendations, was displayed in the hallway like a shrine. Every meal, every holiday, every story was told beneath the shadow of that framed legacy. My younger brother Leo, charming, strong, relentless, declared at 10 years old that he would wear a uniform just like Dad. And he did. Combat boots, battlefield deployments, and every bit of recognition that came with it. Me. I joined intelligence. I remember the night I told Dad. He barely looked up from his scotch. Support work, he muttered. Important in its way, I guess. My mother smiled gently, but her eyes told the truth. They were disappointed. They wanted another soldier. Not someone who would vanish into rooms where things were whispered and never written down. But I didn't argue. Because the things I knew, the missions I led, the lives I helped save, were never meant for dinner conversations. Still, nothing prepared me for what happened on the day of Leo's Silver Star ceremony. Fort Bragg was lit by the midday sun, flags snapping proudly in the breeze. It should have been an ordinary military gathering. Except it wasn't. Because when I arrived in my pressed dress uniform, careful to keep my general insignia covered beneath my overcoat, the young corporal at the gate paused. "Name, ma'am?" he asked. "Mary Bennett," I replied. He scanned the list. His brow furrowed. "I'm sorry, ma'am. You're not listed here." I swallowed hard, the tightness in my throat familiar. "I'm Captain Leo Bennett's sister." He looked again. "I have Harold and Janice Bennett. And a Stephanie Bennett listed. But no Mary Bennett." I knew exactly what had happened. Leo hadn't put me down as family. Maybe he forgot. More likely he didn't think it mattered. From inside the gate I could see them. My parents stepping with pride. Stephanie, Leo's wife, clinging to his arm. And Leo, shoulders square, smiling for the cameras. He saw me standing outside the barrier. And he didn't stop. Didn't say a word. Just smirked like this was all exactly how it was meant to be. The guard shifted nervously. "I'm going to need you to step aside, ma'am." I nodded once, heart pounding. I'd trained for years to stay calm under pressure. To make life and death decisions without flinching. But nothing prepared me for the feeling of being erased by your own blood. Not in front of strangers. Not like this. I took a slow step back. And then I heard the voice. "Is there a problem here?" The tone cut through the air like a blade. The young guard stood at attention immediately. "Commander Marshall," he stammered. "Just a guest who isn't on the list." Turn. Commander Marshall's eyes locked onto mine. "Not on the list," he repeated. He walked forward. Slowly. Deliberately. Then stopped right in front of the gate, stared at the guard and said clearly, "That's General Mary Bennett. She's not a guest. She's here on official orders." The silence after that was deafening. I saw Leo turn. His mouth opened slightly. My mother froze mid-step. My father's expression went blank, unreadable. The guard stumbled backward. I'm sorry, General, I didn't know." "You weren't supposed to," Commander Marshall said calmly. "Now open the gate." As the gate swung open and I stepped inside, my eyes locked briefly with my brother's. He looked stunned, rattled, like the ground had just shifted beneath his boots. And that was only the beginning. As I stepped past the gate, my boots met the pavement with a rhythm I'd trained into myself over the years. Steady, precise, unshakable. But no amount of military discipline could steady the storm brewing in my chest. Could feel eyes. Hundreds of them. Dignitaries, officers, enlisted personnel, civilian guests. But the three pairs of eyes that mattered most were the ones I had grown up trying to earn approval from. My mother's eyes darted from me to Commander Marshall, then back again, her mouth slightly agape. She clutched her handbag like it might shield her from whatever this new reality meant. My father stood beside her, straight-backed as always, but his fingers twitched at his side. His tells had never changed. And then there was Leo. His face told the story before his mouth ever would. Disbelief, confusion, then something else simmering just beneath. Was it fear? No, not fear. Wounded pride. Commander Marshall walked beside me as we entered the courtyard, the polished brass on his chest catching streaks of sunlight. They didn't know, did they? He asked quietly. Kept my gaze forward. No, sir. They've never known. He gave a small nod, as if he understood more than I said. They're about to. Inside the venue, the air was crisp with ceremony. The American flag flanked both sides of the stage, golden fringe lining each corner. Chairs arranged in sharp rows. Music playing softly from a brass ensemble near the entrance. Military decorum, textbook perfect. We bypassed the family seating entirely. VIP row is this way, Commander Marshall said, gesturing toward the front. Followed. As we passed through, heads turned. Officers from multiple branches whispered to each other. A major general from the Air Force gave me a respectful nod. A lieutenant colonel from Intelligence Command stood when we approached. General Bennett, he said with a smile. An honor. I returned the nod, professional and measured. Thank you, Colonel. We reached our seats, reserved, embroidered front and center. Commander Marshall pulled out my chair, then took his beside me. On the other side, 2 admirals and a high-ranking State Department official. Not one member of my family. From across the room I could feel them watching. My father looked like stone. Unmoving. Unreadable. My mother's expression teetered between awe and disbelief. Stephanie leaned toward Leo, whispering something, her brows raised. And Leo? He wasn't looking at me anymore. He was staring at the floor. The ceremony began with the posting of the colors. Then the anthem. Then formal introductions. Every part of me was trained to focus, to sit still, to remain composed no matter what. But my mind kept drifting back. To the kitchen table where my dad used to critique my career choices in between bites of meatloaf. To Christmas mornings where Leo's deployment stories sucked all the air out of the room, while I quietly washed dishes in the background. No one ever asked what I did. No one wanted to know. The master of ceremonies took the stage, announcing the day's agenda. First, Captain Leo Bennett's commendation for valor. Then, an unnamed final award not listed in the public program. My award. I had rehearsed this in my mind a dozen times. How it would feel. How it might land. But nothing could prepare me for the live silence of my own family. Leo's name was called, and the audience applauded as he walked toward the stage. His shoulders were squared, his gait sharp. The perfect image of battlefield excellence. The citation was read aloud. It detailed his actions during Operation Mountain Shield. How he'd led his platoon through a brutal firefight to extract wounded allies. How he'd held his ground under enemy fire. How he'd ensured 0 casualties among his men. It was commendable. Honorable. Truly heroic. I was proud of him. I just wasn't proud of the part where he chose to silence my existence. He accepted his silver star with a practiced humility, then stepped to the mic. This honor belongs not just to me, he began, but to the men who stood beside me that day. He thanked his commanding officers, his team, his fellow soldiers. I want to thank my father, he said, voice steady. Retired Colonel Harold Bennett, who taught me what it means to serve. And my mother, Janice, whose strength gave me the courage to follow this path. And my wife, Stephanie, who held down the fort during every deployment. I waited for it, but my name never came. Not even a mention. No to my sister, no to my family. Not even a passing nod to the woman sitting across the room, dressed in full uniform, wearing stars on her collar. When he finished, the applause rang out again. But I didn't clap. Commander Marshall stood next. The applause died almost instantly. His voice filled the room. Before we conclude today's ceremony, he said, there is one final award. one that has remained classified until now. The shift in the audience was instant. Straightened backs, alert eyes, whispered curiosity. My parents looked confused. Leo glanced at the program again, brows furrowed. Commander Marshall continued. Few among us serve in roles where their greatest acts of courage remain forever unseen. Their sacrifices unspoken. Their heroism hidden in silence. Today, with the declassification of Operation Iron Gate, we have the rare privilege to change that. I heard my mother whisper to my father, "What's Operation Iron Gate?" Commander Marshall turned toward me. "It is my distinct honor to invite to the stage the commanding officer of that operation. The strategist behind one of the most successful counterterrorism missions in U.S. history. General Mary Bennett." Gasps echoed. Murmurs. The scrape of chairs as some people rose automatically in recognition. I stood. The medal on my chest caught the light. Officers rose. The crowd followed. Applause thundered. From my family. Silence. I walked to the stage, each step a lifetime long. Commander Marshall opened a box. The Distinguished Service Cross. As he pinned it to my chest, he whispered, "Long overdue, General." I nodded once, eyes ahead. "Thank you, Commander," I said when it was my turn at the microphone. "This recognition is not mine alone. It belongs to every operative who served under me, whose names will never be known, whose sacrifices protected thousands. This medal belongs to the shadows, and those who live within them." I looked out into the audience and saw them. My father's jaw was tight. My mother was crying quietly. Leo looked down. I didn't flinch. Not anymore. The applause returned louder now. Sustained. Earned. But all I could hear was the silence in their eyes. After the ceremony ended, I remained at the front for a moment longer, my posture straight, my expression unreadable. Not because I was trying to be stoic, but because I had to be. Every fiber of military bearing within me demanded composure, even when my world was spinning from the inside out. As officers approached one by one, generals, commanders, even officials from the intelligence division who normally stayed invisible like ghosts, they extended their hands and offered congratulations. Their words were deliberate and specific, acknowledging not just my medal but the weight of the operations behind it. There was no confusion in their eyes, no questioning of my place. "Exceptional work on Operation Iron Gate, General," said a Navy Rear Admiral as he shook my hand. "We've followed your career for years," said a liaison from the Department of Defense. "Finally good to see you getting the recognition you deserve." They meant it. They knew what it had cost. But through the stream of professional acknowledgments, I kept scanning the crowd, searching for the three faces that had spent years pretending I wasn't capable of any of this. They lingered by the exit, unsure of how to approach. For the first time in my life, it was them on the outside, watching me navigate a world they never imagined I could belong to. Commander Marshall appeared beside me again. "They'll want to talk," he murmured. I didn't answer right away. Then I nodded once. "I know. You can use the conference room down the hall," he said. "Neutral territory." I appreciated the way he phrased that. Neutral. Because this wasn't going to be a conversation. It was going to be a reckoning. When I finally stepped away from the receiving line, I moved toward them without breaking stride. The moment I made eye contact with Leo, his mouth opened, but no words came out. He closed it again. His jaw clenched. Kept my tone calm even. "We should talk." My mother nodded, her hand already reaching for my arm as if afraid I might disappear again. My father hesitated, then gave a short nod. We walked together down the hallway in silence. A lieutenant stepped aside to let us pass, saluting me as we moved past. Leo flinched when he noticed it. The conference room door closed behind us. Inside, everything felt smaller. The fluorescent lights cast a harsh glare on the round table at the center. For chairs. No distractions. My mother sat first. Her hands trembled as they rested on the table. She looked at me like she was seeing me for the first time. "Mary," she whispered. "Why didn't you tell us?" My father remained standing. So did Leo. I removed my uniform cap, placing it gently on the table. I didn't rush to answer. I wanted them to sit with the silence for a moment, the same kind of silence they had offered me for over a decade. Because I couldn't, I said finally. Because everything I did was classified. Because talking would have meant risking the lives of people under my command. People who trusted me. But we're your family, my mother said, her voice breaking. We would have understood. I let the words hang there before answering. No, Mum. You wouldn't have. My father shifted, clearly bristling. That's not fair. I met his eyes. Isn't it? He didn't respond. Leo finally broke. His voice sharp, defensive. You let us believe you were just, what? Some mid-tier analyst pushing reports across a desk? You never said anything. I wasn't allowed to, I said, my tone colder now. And even if I had been, would it have mattered? He looked away. How many times, I continued, did you mock my work at Thanksgiving? How many times did you talk over me? Remind me that real soldiers carry weapons. While I was running operations in 8 different countries, saving assets, dodging bullets, you were lecturing me about real sacrifice. My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. Leo's face was red. Whether from shame or anger, I couldn't yet tell. My father finally sat slowly. I thought I was helping, he said quietly. When you said you were in intelligence, I thought you were stuck. Pulled a few strings. Tried to open some doors for you. I almost laughed. I was already a colonel by then, Dad, I said. Your strings didn't reach as far as mine did. His eyes widened slightly. That hit landed deeper than I intended. My mother blinked back tears. We just didn't know. Because you didn't ask, I replied. I never told you the truth, yes. But you never really wanted to know it either. You already decided what I was. We thought you were choosing the easier path, my father said, his voice flat. The one without danger. I stared at him. Dad, I have scars on my side from a mission that went sideways. I've flown into war zones at night. I've ordered drone strikes. I've pulled people out of buildings moments before they were bombed. My work wasn't easier. It was just quieter. Leo's hands were curled into fists now. You could have told me. Not the details. But something. And if I had, would you have believed me? He didn't answer. The air in the room grew heavy. I turned to him. You stood up there today, I said softly. And you didn't even say my name. He winced. Not even a thank you to my sister. After all these years. After everything. He looked down. I didn't know what to say. You didn't try. My mother reached across the table, her fingers brushing mine. How long, she asked. How long have you been a general? 1 year and 8 months, I said. Her face crumpled. We didn't know, she repeated. I know, I replied. Leo finally sat. His voice was low now. Tired. So what happens now? I leaned back slightly. That's up to you. They looked at each other. Then back at me. And for the first time I saw something shift in all 3 of their eyes. Not understanding. Not yet. But the beginning of it. The silence stretched long after my last words, thick with all the years they had misunderstood me, all the pride they'd reserved for Leo, all the assumptions they had never once questioned. It wasn't resentment I felt. Not anymore. I had long since burned through that. What sat heavy in my chest now was a kind of exhaustion, a deep weariness that came from carrying an invisible truth for too long. My mother was the first to break the silence. I used to worry about you, she said, her voice almost a whisper. Not because I thought you weren't capable, but because I thought you were hiding from your potential. I looked at her, incredulous. Hiding? She nodded slowly. You were always so quiet about your work. I thought. Maybe you didn't want more. I never realized it was because you couldn't tell us what you'd already done. Leo sat back, arms crossed, a furrow between his brows. I used to think I was protecting you, he said bitterly. Every time I told a story about deployment, Every time I joked about you being behind a desk, I thought I was defending you from the reality of what I saw over there. And what reality was that? I asked. Violence. Trauma, he replied. I thought you didn't understand it. I thought your world was safe. I met his eyes. Leo. I've sent men into danger knowing they might not come back. I've watched satellite feeds in real time as operations fell apart. I've listened to dying voices on comms. I've made calls that cost lives. And I've lived with every one of those decisions. His jaw clenched. I didn't know. No, I said. You didn't want to. He didn't argue. My father leaned forward, resting his forearms on the table. His posture was less rigid now. His eyes looked older, as if the weight of this new truth had added years. I used to think the Bennett legacy meant carrying a weapon, he said. Wearing combat boots. Taking orders. Giving them. Medals, rank, deployment scars. He paused. But maybe I've been wrong. The air in the room changed. My breath caught in my throat. When you first joined intelligence, he continued, I was disappointed. Not because I didn't believe in you, but because it didn't look like what I had done. It wasn't familiar. And that made it hard to respect. I sat motionless. He exhaled deeply. But you've done things I couldn't begin to understand. And you did them while letting us believe you were nothing more than support staff. That takes strength I never recognized. My mother wiped at her eyes. Leo still wouldn't meet my gaze. I spent years being proud of being a captain, he said finally. Proud of being the one who carried on Dad's legacy. I needed that. I needed to be the center of it. I know, I said. He looked up at me. But now I know I wasn't the only one who served. His voice cracked slightly. And I wasn't the only one who sacrificed. He ran a hand through his hair. You remember when I came home after Afghanistan? That night I sat on the porch and told you about Jenkins getting hit by an IED. I nodded. You were shaking. You wouldn't look at me. You listened, he said. You said almost nothing. I thought it was because you couldn't relate. But now I wonder if it was because you'd already seen worse. I didn't answer. I didn't have to. His voice softened. I'm sorry, Mary. Those words, simple as they were, cracked something open in me. My brother had never said that to me before. Not once. My mother reached across again and squeezed my hand. Can we try again? She asked. Get to know you. Really know you. I studied her face. For the first time she looked uncertain, not of herself, but of how deeply she'd misunderstood me. Yes, I said quietly. But this time on my terms. She nodded. My father looked up. What can we call you now? He asked. General Bennett. Or still Mary. I smiled faintly. Still Mary, I said. But now you know who she is. A knock came at the door. Commander Marshall's voice followed. General Bennett. The Secretary of Defense would like a word before he departs. I'll be right there, I replied. I stood smoothing my jacket, fixing my collar. My mother stood too. We'll see you back at the reception. Yes, I said. But I need to speak with the secretary first. As I opened the door, Leo stopped me with a hand on my arm. For what it's worth, he said, his voice rough. It's an honor to serve in the same military as you. I turned to him, then gave a short nod. Thank you, Captain Bennett. I left them in the conference room, stepping back into the hallway that led to the reception hall. Officers passed and nodded. Few saluted. I returned each gesture. As I walked, the weight I'd carried for years, of being underestimated, dismissed, erased, felt suddenly lighter. Not gone, but no longer mine alone to bear. They had seen me now. Not just the uniform, but the woman behind it. And the silence that once filled our family had finally begun to crack. The corridor between the conference room and the main hall felt longer than it had earlier. I could hear the soft hum of conversations, the clink of glassware, and the occasional swell of laughter from the reception just ahead. But I wasn't walking into that space as the same woman who had been turned away at the front gate. This time, every step felt heavier with history, yet lighter with truth. Commander Marshall met me just before the double doors. "He's waiting by the east exit," he said, his voice low and respectful. "You made quite the impression, General." "Thank you, sir." "They see you now," he added, a small smile in his voice. "Yes," I said. Finally, I stepped into the reception area. The room had been transformed with white linen draped over round tables, soft lighting casting a warm glow on military insignia, floral centerpieces standing tall beside trays of wine and hors d'oeuvres. Men and women in uniform mingled alongside officials in suits and civilians in their best formal wear. The moment I entered, heads turned. Some nodded, others smiled. A few made their way toward me with purpose. But I was looking for someone else. The Secretary of Defense stood near the far wall, speaking with 2 aides and an Air Force general. He caught my eye immediately and dismissed the conversation with a polite gesture. As I approached, he extended his hand. "General Bennett," he said, "I wanted to speak with you personally before I leave. Your work on Operation Iron Gate has reshaped our counterterrorism doctrine. That's not praise I give lightly." "Thank you, sir," I replied. "We'll be reviewing your recommendations for the joint intelligence expansion. If we implement even half of what you've built, it will change how we operate across the board." "I'm honored, sir." He paused, studying me with eyes far sharper than his age suggested. "I understand today's recognition was unexpected for your family." I gave a tight nod. "Yes. They've only just learned who I really am." "Good," he said simply. "They should know." He offered another firm handshake, then departed with his aides in tow. I turned back to the room, letting out a quiet breath. The evening wasn't over. There was one final hurdle I had to face. My family was still here. I spotted them clustered near the edge of the room. My mother was speaking with Stephanie, who kept glancing nervously toward me. My father stood stiffly near the wall, drink in hand, expression unreadable. Leo paced a few feet away, rubbing the back of his neck. I excused myself from 2 colonels who had approached and made my way toward them. "General Bennett," Leo said as I arrived. The name still sounded strange in his voice, like a new uniform he hadn't quite tailored to fit. "You've been busy." "So have you," I replied. "Silver Star doesn't just happen." He gave a tight smile. "Yeah, still feels weird." We stood there for a beat too long. The air between us was heavy with everything we hadn't said over the years. "Do you want to sit?" I offered. He looked surprised. Yeah, let's do that." We found an empty table near the window. My parents followed. Stephanie hesitated, then joined us as well, settling beside Leo with cautious silence. The clatter of silverware and distant hum of music filled the gaps between our words. My father cleared his throat. "Your mother wants to hang your picture," he said without preamble. And blinked. "What picture?" "The one they took during the medal presentation," he replied. "Next to mine and Leo's in the hallway." My mother touched his arm lightly. "I already printed a copy. Just need a frame." For a moment I couldn't speak. Those walls had been sacred for decades, reserved only for the men of the house, for combat and rank, for what they deemed real service. To think of my face among them. I nodded once. "Thank you." Leo took a sip of his drink, then spoke again. "Steph and I were talking about Thanksgiving," he said. "We want you there this year." "I've never not been there," I said. He winced. "I know. I mean, really there. No more jokes about desk jobs. No more side-eye from Uncle Jim when you talk about your work. Just come as you." "That's all I ever wanted," I said softly. "It's what you deserve." My mother reached into her purse and pulled out something small, folded paper aged at the edges. "Your father wrote a speech for Leo's first promotion ceremony," she said, handing it to me. "I found this in a drawer yesterday. There's a part he crossed out. I thought you should read it." I unfolded it carefully. The writing was neat, deliberate. The lines struck through in pencil were still legible. And to my daughter Mary, whose service may not be visible to the world, but who carries her own quiet battles every day. I am proud of you, even if I don't always understand the war you fight. I looked up at him. His face was still. Then he said, I wasn't brave enough to say it that day. I'm sorry. My throat tightened. I folded the paper again, then slid it into my pocket. Thank you for saving it. Stephanie finally spoke, voice low. I used to think you were just really good at typing, she said with a self-conscious laugh. I told my cousin you'd make a great match for him because he needed someone calm. I probably would have bored him to death, I said. She smiled. Probably. We sat together like that for a while longer. No grand revelations. No more lectures or apologies. Just 5 people learning how to breathe in this new reality. After a time my father stood. I'll get us drinks, he said. I'll help, Leo added, following him. They disappeared into the crowd. My mother watched them go, then turned to me. You're not what we imagined, she said. I raised an eyebrow. Disappointed. No, she said. Ashamed. Of how long it took us to see you. Her eyes welled with tears again. But I see you now. I reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. I've always been here, I said. Just behind a different kind of uniform. A shadow moved beside me. Commander Marshall had returned. General, they'd like you to meet the NATO liaison before he leaves. I stood and nodded. Thank you, Commander. My mother touched my arm before I walked away. Bring the medal on Thanksgiving. Smiled. Only if I get to carve the turkey. Deal. As I followed Commander Marshall toward the next set of introductions, I looked back once. Leo was watching me from across the room. He raised his glass. And this time he was the first to salute. 3 days after the ceremony, I returned home to my quiet apartment just outside Fort Bragg. The dress uniform, still holding the faint scent of polished brass and ceremony, hung from its place on the doorframe. The Distinguished Service Cross sat in its velvet case on my desk, closed. I hadn't opened it since Commander Marshall pinned it to my chest. Some medals were meant for display. This one felt different. I moved through my space slowly. There was no urgency anymore. No operation to plan. No voice on the secure line needing extraction. Just silence. Stillness. And for the first time in years, it didn't feel lonely. The call came just before midnight. You're going to want to see this, said Major Lester, my operations chief. Check the front page of Defense Weekly. I pulled up the article on my tablet. The General in the Shadows. How Mary Bennett rewrote the rules of modern intelligence. My face wasn't on it. Course not. But the piece described Operation Iron Gate in impressive detail. Well, as much detail as was legally declassified. The journalist referenced unnamed sources within Defense Command who spoke of my leadership, my intuition, the sacrifices my team had made. There was no puff, no dramatics. Just facts, quiet praise. I closed the article and stared at the blank wall in front of me. Growing up, our hallway had been lined with photos. My father in his colonel's uniform. His medals framed beside him. Leo at West Point, jaw sharp, eyes full of fire. And me, smiling at my college graduation in civilian clothes, a business casual blouse instead of fatigues. The only photo where my name wasn't followed by a rank. After the ceremony, my mother had taken that photo down. She told me so in a text that simply read, "Your new photo is being framed." I think it's time the hallway told the full story. I didn't reply. Not because I didn't care, but because I was still learning how to let that love back in without bracing for disappointment. 2 weeks later they invited me home. Not for a holiday, not for a special occasion. Just dinner. No pressure, Leo said on the phone. Steak night. Dad's grilling. It was strange hearing that casual warmth in his voice. A tone that had been missing for so long it almost sounded foreign. I arrived just after 6. The house looked exactly the same. Flag out front, brass door knocker shaped like an eagle, porch light flickering slightly like it always had. The scent of grilled meat wafted from the backyard, and the sound of a baseball game played low on the outdoor speakers. But inside, the hallway had changed. My photo now hung between Leo's and my father's. My new portrait. Uniform crisp, a steady. The medal visible on my chest. Beneath it a simple plaque. Brigadier General Mary Bennett. Operation Iron Gate. Distinguished Service Cross. I stood there for a moment, tracing the edge of the frame with my fingers. Behind me my mother appeared. "We had the same framer who did your father's," she said softly. "Turn. It's beautiful. You look like you," she said. "That's the idea." She smiled. "Come on. Your father's about to overcook the steaks." The backyard hadn't changed much either. Same grill. Same chairs. Same yellow bulbs strung between the fence posts. But the conversation was different. Dad asked about my new assignment. Genuinely interested, not just polite. Leo asked about cyber operations and how they'd changed the intelligence landscape. He listened when I spoke. Not waiting to respond. Actually listening. Stephanie even apologized again for her cousin's setup attempt. "I still owe you for that," she laughed. "I promise I thought you were just some overqualified secretary." "A secretary with a body count," I said dryly. She blinked, then burst out laughing. "Okay, that's officially the coolest response ever." After dinner, Dad handed me a drink. Not a toast, not a speech. Just a quiet glass of scotch and a long look. "You were always going to be more than I imagined," he said. I nodded. "And less than you assumed." "Yes," he said. "That too." Leo joined me on the porch a while later. We watched the moon rise over the tree line, our silhouettes cast long across the grass. "So," he said, "do I still outrank you in push-up form?" "No," I said. "And I never did." He laughed. "Fair." A beat of silence passed. Then he said, "You ever think about what it would have been like if we'd known sooner?" I turned to him. "You mean if you hadn't spent 10 years calling me a paper pusher?" He winced. "Yeah, that. Thought about it. Maybe," I said. "But maybe this was how it needed to happen." He looked at me confused. "I don't follow." "You needed to see me from the outside," I said. "So you could understand what I was carrying on the inside." He was quiet for a long time. Then he offered his hand. This time not a joking salute. Not a casual shoulder tap. But a handshake. Between two officers. Between equals. Took it. And for the first time, the past didn't feel like a shadow between us. Felt like a bridge. Weeks passed. Then months. The buzz around Operation Iron Gate had settled into quiet respect. There were no headlines anymore. No new commendations. Just routine. Strategy meetings. Reports. Flight manifests. It was the rhythm of military intelligence. A life lived in the shadows even when the spotlight briefly found you. But inside something had shifted. Not in the mission. Me. For the first time in 15 years I felt whole. Not two halves of a double life. Not General Bennett during the day and someone else entirely when I came home. But one person finally seen. I didn't need the medal. I didn't need the article. What I needed, what I had always needed, was acknowledgement from the 3 people whose silence had shaped me more than war zones ever could. And now that acknowledgement lived in every call, every family dinner, every short text that ended with "proud of you." It lived in the hallway at home. And it lived in how I stood, how I spoke, how I walked into each new room no longer pretending I was smaller than the weight I carried. But life, especially military life, doesn't pause for personal evolution. A month after the ceremony, I was deployed again. Not to combat, but to coordinate joint intelligence exercises across 5 nations. They called it diplomacy with teeth. I called it another mission to build trust where walls had been standing too long. One evening, somewhere between briefings in Brussels and a classified meeting in Berlin, I found myself alone in a quiet airport terminal. It was late. The last flight of the night had already boarded. The overhead lights had dimmed. I sat near a charging station, phone in hand. Message came through. Leo, Thanksgiving's coming. Mom's already making lists. Smiled. She always starts early. Tell her I'll bring wine. A moment later. Leo, bring the medal too. Me, seriously. Leo, yeah. Uncle Jim still thinks it was for administrative excellence. I laughed out loud. A sharp, real sound that echoed slightly across the empty terminal. Vain. But only if you carve the turkey. Leo Dill. Also, I saved you a spot in the family toast this year. I read the line again. Slowly. In our house, the Thanksgiving toast had always been Leo's. Passed down from Dad. A father-to-son tradition. But now, there was space for me too. Space they had made. Space I had earned. When I returned home the following week, I walked into the house without hesitation. My photo still hung proudly in the hallway. My name was spoken with the same reverence once reserved for my father. And during the toast, when Dad handed Leo the first glass, Leo didn't raise it right away. Instead, he turned and handed it to me. You start, he said. I looked at the room. Family, laughter, mismatched chairs, children darting between legs, stories half told and spilling into the mashed potatoes. It was imperfect, messy, real. And it was mine. I raised the glass. To service, I said. In all its forms. The room echoed the words back, glasses clinking softly. Afterward, Mom pulled me aside in the kitchen. She opened a small drawer and pulled out a folder. Inside were newspaper clippings, printouts, photos. All about women in uniform. Generals, analysts, leaders. I've started a scrapbook, she said. For Claire. My niece. Leo's daughter. And blinked. What for? For her to know what's possible, she said. And who showed her first? I swallowed hard. Thank you, Mom. She kissed my cheek. You showed me too. Later that night, after the dishes had been stacked and the house quieted, Leo and I stood outside beneath the porch light. He looked at me for a long time. You know what's funny, he said. What? For all the years I thought I was carrying the Bennett legacy. Turns out it was you all along. I shook my head. It was never just one of us, Leo. It was both. He smiled. And for the first time I believed it. Not because he said it, but because now I finally saw it too. There's a certain kind of silence that becomes part of you. Not the silence of solitude or peace, but the silence you build to survive being unseen. It starts small. Omissions, vague phrases, misdirections, and over time it becomes armor. You tell yourself it's necessary. Operational security, chain of command, protection, and it is. But when the mission ends, the armor doesn't just fall off. Clings. I learned that the hard way during my early years in military intelligence. Back then I was stationed overseas, working inside a high-security compound with no windows and no clocks. My days were measured in incoming intel, satellite feeds, intercepted chatter. We worked in shifts that blurred time. Some days I forgot what month it was. Others I forgot what year. The first time I lost a source, it was a young interpreter named Rafiq. He'd passed intel to us from inside a warlord's circle. For months his information had saved lives. Not hypothetically, literally. Then one morning we got word his cover was blown. I was the one who sent him back in. Had to. The mission demanded it. He didn't make it out. I never told my family. Course I didn't. How could I explain to my mother, who worried if I skipped Sunday calls, that her daughter had quietly sent someone to die in a war she'd never hear about on the news? How could I tell my father that while Leo was earning stripes through firefights, I was earning mine through decisions no rifle could solve? And Leo? He wouldn't have understood. Not then. So I buried it. Like I buried so many things. Rafiq's face joined the quiet crowd of ghosts I carried. Not in nightmares but in empty spaces. In the way I paused before every new mission. In the hesitation behind every classified yes or no. You don't survive this line of work by letting grief swallow you. But you also don't leave it behind. After the ceremony, after my family saw who I really was, I thought that weight might lift. And it did. But not in the way I expected. The relief didn't come from their approval. It came from the permission I finally gave myself to stop hiding. In the weeks that followed, I began writing. Not for publication. Not for history books. Just for me. A record of the people who never got medals. The decisions made at 3 a.m. with no good options. The quiet sacrifices that would never earn applause. I filled pages. One night Leo called unexpectedly. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked, skipping hello. I didn't have to ask what he meant. Sometimes, I admitted. Not the service. Just the silence. He let that hang between us. "Steph found my letters," he said finally. "The ones I never sent. The ones from deployment." I leaned back in my chair. What did she say? She cried. Then she told me to stop pretending I was fine all the time. "And will you?" He laughed softly. "Working on it. We were learning. All of us. Learning that strength didn't mean never breaking. That legacy wasn't about who shouted the loudest or marched the straightest. It was about who carried the weight when no one else could, and still found the courage to keep walking." A few days later I got a letter in the mail. No return address. Just a wax seal. The kind used for internal commendations, not meant for public recognition. Inside, a single sheet of thick parchment. To General Mary Bennett. Your service has altered the course of operations across 4 regions. Your discretion, leadership, and unflinching loyalty have saved more lives than can be publicly acknowledged. You are, and have always been, essential. There was no signature. Just the seal again. A different kind of medal. I stared at it for a long time. Then I filed it away, between my notes on Rafik and the mission logs that could never be printed. Not everything needed to be seen to be real. And sometimes the loudest legacy is the one never spoken. Thanksgiving came quickly. Maybe it was because I'd been busy again. Another string of briefings, closed-door sessions, and intelligence joint training in Virginia. Or maybe it was just the strange way time seems to move after your life shifts. Like the ground settles under new weight, adjusting quietly, never asking your permission. When I pulled into the driveway of my parents' house that morning, I sat in the car for a while. It was strange. I'd been here 1,000 times before. Same front door. Same light crack on the third panel. Same flag mounted under the porch awning. But this time was different. This time I was returning not as the daughter they politely asked about in passing, not as the older sister they pitied for her boring military desk job. This time, I was General Mary Bennett. And they knew it. I stepped out of the car, dust swirling around my boots. The air smelled of pine needles and charcoal smoke. Dad was already grilling as promised. I reached into the back seat and lifted the medal case. I wasn't going to bring it. But something in Leo's voice when he asked last week, "Bring the medal too," made me change my mind. I rang the bell. Mum answered. Her eyes lit up, arms wrapping around me before I could even speak. "You came. I said I would." She pulled back, brushing my hair behind my ear. "You brought it." I lifted the case slightly. "Good," she whispered. "I want Claire to see it." Inside, the house was warm and full of life. Children shrieked down the hallway. Distant voices echoed from the living room. Clatter in the kitchen. It was like every Thanksgiving before. But the hallway was still quiet. Paused there again. Between Leo's West Point photo and Dad's retirement plaque stood my portrait. Even now, I had to remind myself it was real. It wasn't Photoshop. It wasn't temporary. It belonged here. My medal sat in its case beneath it, resting on a small shelf Dad had installed himself. Mom stepped up behind me. "Your father checks the lighting in this hallway every night now. Says the shine on your brass needs to be perfect." Smiled. Some habits die hard. In the dining room, the table stretched long with mismatched chairs. Stephanie waved from the far end. Claire was coloring at the table, tongue poking out in concentration. "Is that the general?" Leo called from the backyard door. Turned. He was still in an apron, flipping something on the grill with tongs in hand. But the smile on his face was different now. Not mocking. Not proud of himself. Proud of me. I raised the metal case slightly. You still want this? You kidding? You're sitting at the head of the table this year. I arched a brow. Dad said it. Not me, he added. I walked outside. The sky was bright, clouds thin and stretched like gauze. The backyard hadn't changed. Same rusted swing set. Same lopsided garden bed. Same spot where Leo broke his arm doing backflips when we were kids. But the energy was different. Dad was by the grill. When he saw me, he gave a crisp nod. You're on potato duty, he said. Yes, sir. He smirked. That's a general's order now, not a father's. I laughed. Noted. The food was served an hour later. Turkey, roasted vegetables, mashed potatoes, 4 kinds of pie. And then the toast. Leo stood first. Normally this is my moment, he began, glass raised. Few chuckles. But this year. He turned to me. We pass the honor to the one among us who served longest, led the most missions, and carried the heaviest weight with the quietest strength. He held out the glass to me. General. I stood slowly. I looked at every face at the table. Family, friends, children who'd never know what we had been before. I held my glass steady. To those who serve, I said. In ways the world may never see. The clink of glasses followed. Genuine. After dinner, Claire approached me as I stood near the kitchen. She was holding a crayon drawing. A woman in a uniform with stars on her collar. Big boots. A medal around her neck. This is you, she said. I knelt down beside her. It's perfect. I want to be like you when I grow up, she whispered. I swallowed hard. You already are, I said. When I left that night, I walked through the hallway one more time. My picture was still there. But something had changed. No longer looked like proof. It looked like a beginning. 3 months later, I received an invitation I hadn't expected. Not from the Pentagon, not from Joint Operations, not from Defense Command. It was from West Point. Guest speaker. Commencement address. Class of 20XX. I read the line over twice. Then again. They wanted me to speak to the next generation of military leaders. The very place that had once felt like Leo's rightful kingdom was now calling me forward, not as someone's sister, not as someone's daughter, but on my own merit. Said yes, not because I wanted the spotlight, but because there was something I had to say. Not just to the cadets, but to the girl I used to be. The one who sat in silence during dinner while her brother was congratulated for every push-up. The one who chose the shadows. The one who never stopped serving, even when no one noticed. When the day arrived, I wore the same uniform from the ceremony. Same stars. Same brass. Same quiet dignity. The auditorium was filled. Cadets sitting tall and rigid in their chairs. Faculty. Families. The brass band played a low anthem as I was introduced. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Brigadier General Mary Bennett. Applause. Polite. Curious. I walked to the podium. And then I began. 15 years ago, I made a decision that many of you will face, I said. I chose a path that no one applauded. I didn't jump from planes. I didn't carry a rifle. I didn't fight in trenches or lead platoons into battle. Paused, letting the silence breathe. I chose intelligence. Few nods. And for years my family believed I had taken the easy route. That I had walked away from the legacy they held dear. What they didn't know, what they couldn't know, was that I was coordinating operations in 9 countries, overseeing missions that saved thousands of lives. I was commanding in the dark. I looked out at them, rows and rows of faces just starting their journey. Some of you will stand on stages where your names are shouted. Others will serve in silence. Some of you will write history. Others will erase threats before history ever knows they existed. I rested both hands on the sides of the podium. What matters is not the recognition you receive. It's the integrity with which you serve. There is no lesser branch. No lesser sacrifice. The shadows need leaders too. The room held its breath. "I know," I said. "Because I was one of them." And then the applause came. Louder. Full-bodied. Not polite this time, but real. Later that afternoon, as the cadets filed past in formation, a young woman stopped to salute me. "Ma'am," she said, "my family doesn't think intelligence is a real path. Today you made me believe I chose right." I returned her salute. "You did." When I returned to base that night, there was a new message waiting in my inbox. Subject: Clearance Change Authorization. Body: Per updated protocol, General Mary Bennett is now cleared to debrief select portions of Operation Iron Gate for educational leadership purposes. Effective immediately. I leaned back in my chair. After all these years, the work I had done in silence was finally becoming part of the narrative. Training materials, academies, war colleges. Not the details, but the principles, the strategy, the integrity behind every hard decision. I pulled the medal case from the shelf and opened it slowly. The Distinguished Service Cross gleamed in the low light. But this time when I looked at it, I didn't see the weight of what I'd lost. I saw what had been rebuilt. The hallway at home had grown. Mom had added photos from West Point, from the speech, even from that Thanksgiving toast. The 3 frames, mine, Leo's, and Dad's, now sat level side by side. Equal. Claire had drawn new pictures. She sent them to me by mail, folded 3 times and sealed with glitter tape. The last one showed 3 figures. 2 in combat helmets. 1 in a cap with stars. All holding hands. The caption: The Bennetts. Protectors. I hung it beside my desk. Reminder. Not of what I had to prove, but of what had already been seen. After the lights were off and the base quieted, I stood at the window of my office. The stars were out, clear, brilliant, and sharp, just like the ones on my collar. And for the first time, I didn't wonder whether I had earned them. I knew I had. Not because someone handed them to me, but because I had built them, quietly, persistently, without applause. Brick by brick, decision by decision, sacrifice by sacrifice. This wasn't about vindication anymore. This was about truth. And now that truth lived in every room I walked into. Not hidden. Not denied. Assumed.